At the risk of sounding dramatic, dirty dishes have taken up a huge portion of my life. Growing up, I was often tasked with doing the dishes after dinner. And even with the help of other siblings or my mother, this chore usually took hours and hours because I grew up in a family with 12 children and because these dishes were usually from the entire day. As an adult, I've often procrastinated doing the dishes, telling myself that I can do them later, just to be left with a huge mess to catch up on the next day. I've cried over the dishes, mostly in elementary school. In college, I had a falling out with my roommate over the dishes. We were friends before that. No longer, because of dishes. And ultimately, it's just taken up much more mental space in my life than I'd care to admit. But at this point, I don't really feel that way about them anymore. They don't really stress me out. They're no longer a huge negative point in my existence. And for the most part, they don't really get out of control. So here's what I changed to go from someone who had a consistently messy kitchen to the point where I would literally move over dirty dishes in order to make space to cook, to someone who keeps the dishes clean all the time. I just want to start off by saying that we have the power to change our habits. God designed our brains in a way that allows us to form habits and then perform those things without thinking about it. Think about brushing your teeth in the morning, or if you've ever driven home from somewhere and wondered how you got there. It can also be negative habits like biting your fingernails or binge eating in front of the TV every night. Good or bad, when you form a habit, it is something that does not take much thought, much decision making to do. You just do it. So you can use this to your advantage in your household. It takes discipline in the beginning, but in the long run, it is crazy how much it pays off. So the first habit that I started doing every morning was putting away the dishes from the night before. I usually do this while our coffee seeps. We use a French press for our coffee in the morning and it has to seep for 5 minutes. So during those 5 minutes, I just have a goal to put away everything. I can usually finish it in that time frame. If I have a little bit left over, I'll just finish putting everything away while I sip my coffee. It's a great time. But because I've been doing this for months and months and months consistently, when the coffee seeps, I put away the dishes. It is a habit now. It is something that I don't even have to think about. And sometimes I don't even remember having put the dishes away. I'm like, oh wow, how did that get done? It wasn't that way at first, but it became that way eventually. And I just really like doing this because it sets me up for a new day. If the dishwasher is empty and ready to be loaded up, then I'm much more likely to put the new dishes in as they come versus having to do the dirty dishes and also empty the dishwasher at the same time. I'm just way less likely to actually clean the dishes if I'm not setting myself up for success first thing in the morning with the clean slate of an empty dishwasher. The second thing that I did was told myself that this was my one goal. I don't know if you guys fully understand what my life and my husband's life used to be like. But I wouldn't say I'm a clean person naturally. The kitchen was constantly in shambles. A clean kitchen was the exception to the rule of a horribly dirty kitchen. In my defense, I have a very small kitchen, so it gets very dirty very quickly, but it was bad. It was a disaster area, and I remember thinking several times, if I don't get this under control, I'm going to give me and my family salmonella. My mindset was very much cook, and then I'll clean it up later. Maybe tomorrow. And then every morning I would wake up and the kitchen would be awful. And I would spend the first 45 minutes to hour and a half of my new day cleaning up the mess from the night before. On top of that, the rest of the house was usually a big mess because, like I said, not naturally that clean. So I would get stressed out, overwhelmed, want to clean everything at once, and just feel like nothing ever stayed clean longer than 10 minutes. So I decided to make one goal, one mission in life. Not really, but one mission in the cleanliness of my house. I mean, I had other goals like keeping the bathroom not disgusting. But this became my number one priority. I told myself, if nothing else, I am going to keep the kitchen clean. If the rest of the house is in shambles, but the kitchen is clean, I have succeeded at something. Which leads me into the third thing that I started doing with this goal in mind, which was putting the kitchen to bed. I got this idea from Mrs. Midwest. I will link her Instagram down below. But she talks about putting the kitchen to bed every night before you go to sleep. The concept is simple. You put your kids to bed, you put yourself to bed, you can also put your kitchen to bed. Which basically just means you are making sure the dishes are done, the counters are wiped, the floor is swept before you go to sleep. So every night, whether I had kept up on the dishes that day or not, I started putting the kitchen to bed consistently. And this, combined with my efforts during the day, became habits. And next thing I knew, it wasn't a huge task for me to drag myself over to the sink and start washing the dishes. It became something that I did automatically after meals. I don't think it was just the repetition and the muscle memory that helped me to stay consistent with this. I think a huge factor was the fact that I was very, very used to seeing the kitchen in a state of disaster. And when I started making an effort to clean up after every meal and at the very least put the kitchen to bed, I started getting used to seeing the kitchen clean, or at least somewhat clean. It was no longer the exception to the rule, and it made me want to keep the kitchen clean more often. It became weird to see dishes strewn out on the counter. I didn't want that to be my life anymore. I guess you could say I had gotten a taste of what it could be, how much more peaceful it could feel, how much nicer it was to cook in a clean kitchen, how much nicer it was to wake up in the morning to a clean kitchen instead of a huge mess from last night's dinner. And I think it was just the mindset shift that I needed to be a better steward of my kitchen. Another thing I will say is I think that clean spreads in the same way dirty spreads. If your living room is already a little cluttered, you're more likely to care less when you toss your jacket on the couch. If it is perfectly clean, you're more likely to put that jacket in the closet where it belongs. So having a consistently clean kitchen has actually weirdly translated into a cleaner house overall. Something I've started doing after I put the kitchen to bed is doing a 10-minute house tidy. Just, fluffing the pillows, putting random books away, and it feels easy. An object in motion stays in motion. Once you've already started cleaning, it's not that hard to keep cleaning versus forcing yourself to get up and start. And on top of that, I think putting the kitchen to bed gives you a sense of accomplishment, gives you more peace in the home, and it gives you the feeling that you want to spread that peace to the other parts of your home. And things are easier to do when you want to do them. Another thing I did was I tried to start cleaning as I cooked. This was something my mom always emphasized when I was growing up. Clean up as you go, Abigail. But I do feel like it is a bit hard for me because I will forget about the food and sometimes burn it if I'm not really careful. But it does help a lot. And after you cook a big meal, sometimes the last thing that you want to do is the dishes. So if you can knock some of that out while the big meal is cooking, it's a win-win. Every little bit counts, it chips away, and if you're already waiting for the food to be done, cleaning while you cook is just a no-brainer. On top of that, I tried to shift my mindset and start thinking more positively about the dishes. I started thanking God for my dishes. Not everyone has dishes, not everyone can afford dishes. There was literally a point in college when all I owned was 2 plastic picnic plates, 2 plastic picnic bowls, 2 plastic cups, and 2 sets of cutlery. Having nice dishes, or dishes at all for that matter, are a blessing. And I think it's good to start looking at them that way. I also started thanking God for my kitchen. Again, I haven't always had a kitchen of my own. It's a blessing. I started thanking God for the meals that He provided that led to these dishes being dirty in the first place. And I started using the dishes time to pray, listen to sermons, memorize verses, or other things I liked, like calling my mom, love her, watching YouTube videos, or listening to an audiobook. And then it's no longer this big dreaded task that you have to do. It's like, oh, I'm doing the dishes. I can put on this YouTube video without feeling guilty about it. Productivity. And then another thing that I do quite often to make the dishes more fun is make a game out of it. This might sound really lame, but you need to understand I started doing the dishes, like a lot of dishes, at 8 years old. So had to get through them somehow. So I made up games to cope. I'm not joking. 11 siblings. So many dishes. By that point, only 9 of us lived in the house, so 8 siblings in the house, but still, it was a lot of dishes. They were mostly brothers, and they ate a lot. But I remember when I was a kid, I used to play this game where the dirty dishes were like in the waiting room of the airport, and then they had to go through the soapy water and the rinsing, and then they had to wait at the drying rack, and then finally they could go home to the cupboards when they were all dry. And I was getting these customers through the line, and every kind of dish was a family, like the cup family and the plate family and the bowl family and the fork family. It was elaborate. But now I mostly count. Like if I really don't feel like cleaning up after a meal, I'll tell myself like, okay, I'm just gonna do 5 little things like forks, spatulas, etc. 5 medium-sized things like bowls, cups, etc. And 5 big things like pots, pans, etc. Or if the counters are a mess, I'll tell myself, okay, I'm gonna do 2 dishes from the sink, and then I'll add 5 from the counter, and then the counters. I'm crazy. And then if I have a big mess on the counters and some dishes in the sink, I'll make up something like, okay, I'm just gonna do 3 dishes from the sink, and then I have to add 5 dishes in from the counters, and then I have to do those 3 dishes and 5 and 3 and 5, and make sure that the sink doesn't fill up too much. Now that I say it out loud, it sounds really lame, but it helps me get through it. It makes it more entertaining. It breaks it up. Use it or don't. It works for me. If I can create a little challenge for myself, making the dishes a little bit more fun, I don't see why not. But ultimately, my biggest motivation in all of this, in all of the methods I started implementing, was the fact that as a wife, as a homemaker, I want to provide a peaceful environment for my husband, and Lord willing, one day our future children. I know how much he appreciates a clean kitchen. I know how hard he works, and I want to give him a peaceful home because he's the best. And it is a small gift for me to give that I know means so much to him. He never gave me a hard time all those months upon months when the kitchen was in a constant state of disaster, but I know how much he appreciates a clean and peaceful home. And surprisingly, it has impacted me in such a positive way as well. A constantly dirty kitchen is stressful. Forming these habits have led to a less stressful life. It's helped to cultivate a more peaceful home. It's helped to give me pride in my work, confidence in the fact that I can keep a home and manage it well. And it's ultimately just made our home a more enjoyable place to live. All right, well, if you like clean dishes, then you probably also like saving money on groceries. Don't we all? So make sure to check out my video on how we cut our grocery bill almost in half right here next. Hit that subscribe button for more videos around simpler living, biblical femininity, and the art of homemaking. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one.